Good evening, everybody. I didn't mean to stop the music. It's not going to stop for long, I promise. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This feels like a party, not your average night at Georgetown, which we intend to, keep the vibe good. How are you all feeling? You okay? Good, good, good. All right, so who here is actually from Georgetown? All right, welcome, Georgetown. Who here is from the community? All right, good representation. I think we have some South Sudan coming at some point, but they got the time off, so we may have South Sudan coming in the room a little later. So my name is Gillian Hubner. I am new to Georgetown myself. I started an experiment here with the support of the Office of the Vice President for the Office of Global Engagement. And the experiment is a collaborative to focus on global children's issues. And a collaborative, of course, means that we don't do anything alone. So the idea is to tap into all of the energy happening throughout the university that gives some attention and focus to children's issues. And so tonight we have, we're doing this together with the African Studies Program, the Center for Child and Human Development, the Center for Social Justice, the Department of Psychology, the Global Health Institute, the Global Human Development Program, the Lab for Global Performance in Politics, and the School for Foreign Service. So that's a nice group of people committed to focusing on children. So the reason we're doing this, actually, is because you can get trained in a place like this, a premier training ground for the Foreign Service and international development, and you can go out into the world having actually never really thought about the issues that you care about from the lens of young people. And I know this because this is what happened to me. I didn't train here, but I did my degrees in conflict resolution and international conflict, ethnic conflict, nationalism, war, peace, all that stuff. And then I get into my career, and I'm in a war zone in Angola, working for the United Nations, and as happens, I encountered young people affected by conflict, right? So I worked with some former, child soldiers who were reintegrating into their communities. And in that experience, I realized nothing in my training prepared me for this. To meet a 13-year-old who'd been soldiered, who'd been through hell and back again. I wasn't prepared. None of my training prepared me for that. Fortunately, this young boy, he was called captain by his peers because he was quite a leader. He noticed that I had no idea what I was doing. And as a good 13-year-old, he felt free to tell me. And I really appreciated that because he named absolutely everything I needed to see. And so my captain, he actually told me what I should be doing with my life. And because nobody had ever given me such a clear direction, I listened to him. So voila, for the past 20 years, I've been working on thinking about how do we change our systems, our responses, our training, our institutions to actually center children and young people. And as one person in one of our workshops today said, if you're not noticing children, who now make up, a good 50% of the population if you count children and youth, if you're not considering children and youth in the issues that you care about, you're not even noticing 50% of the challenge, nor are you noticing at least 50% of the solution, right? So that's what this collaborative is about. We're trying to focus, whether you are interested in climate change or the war in Ukraine or poverty reduction or global health. There is a way to look at these things through the lens of children, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. So thank you for coming out. This is sort of a celebration in a week of workshops. We have 12 workshops in 4 days. Some people think that's crazy. I do too, having done it. But anyway, so we're gonna have a sort of a celebration, but also a very grounding one, right? This is celebrating the full range of human experience. Emmanuel Jal, as you know, is a former child soldier from South Sudan who also is a performing artist and an author and an actor. And after he kind of brings us through his story, we're going to have a community conversation with Ifra Mansour, who is a Somali playwright who lives in Minnesota, and she's actually a fellow with the Global Lab on Performance and Politics, or the Lab on Global Performance and Politics. And she also lived through a war as a young child. And we're also joined by Kirill Mironenko, who's a Ukrainian student at Georgetown who arrived here after the war began. And he also actually happens to be an award-winning hip-hop dancer. So we thought we would just bring everybody together tonight and have a conversation about trauma, healing, and the interplay with culture and creativity. So before I get off the stage, I do want to just say this is, we will have a lot of joy tonight. We'll also feel pain. And the conversation will not spare you that. So this is a little bit of a content warning. Emmanuel is going to give it to you straight, and he's going to share some tough stuff, and some of it might be upsetting. So if you feel like you need to walk out or something, that's okay. And he will bring you through the pain and back into a place of joy, I guarantee you. So thank you for joining us, and here we go. So I'm just going to introduce these guys briefly, because sometimes they don't introduce themselves fully, as I've learned with Ifra, who, by the way, led an amazing workshop this morning on healing with humor. It was very play-based, and it was really like helping us get back into our childhood selves and remember what it's like to interact with the world in a playful way, even in the midst of pain and suffering. So, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. I just want to start with just gratitude. Like, I feel that my heart is fed and healed. What is it? I'm Ifra Mansour. I grew up here. I also grew up in Somalia during the Civil War, and I was just connecting to everything you were saying because I was actually blessed to be around adults who sort of like embodied this idea of holding imagination and this idea of making almost heaven in the midst of like violence. So my grandmother would just play with us while they were like, you could hear the guns. So I'm just sitting with so much gratitude. And for me, I'm also like renaming the moments in my childhood where my trauma wants me to tell that it was nothing but pain, but there was actually joy, because I got to see how the adults sort of like showed up, how the adults sort of like, stood up to violence. What else can I say? Yeah, those are like things that are just like waking up for me, and I prefer to share that versus like all the things that I do. I'm a teacher, I make puppets, I make plays, all of that, but I just...
She also made a play called How to Have Fun in a Civil War, which is the experience of a Somali 7-year-old in the midst of the war. Beautiful. And Kirill is a freshman in the School of Foreign Service from Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
And I mean, talk about living in the midst of it now, right? Arriving here on a full scholarship, but arriving here while his family is at threat, and doing an amazing job at school and speaking with Congress, and yet carrying this weight, and yet you're also a creative spirit. You've said some really interesting things about how you've carried your dance and your culture into this moment. So maybe you can share a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your story with us. I honestly feel like I'm here more to listen and learn rather than share and tell something about myself, but I'm very humbled and very honored to be able to spend this time with you all today. I'm a freshman at Georgetown University. I lived my entire life in Ukraine before the war began. Then I had to leave my home. I was honestly in the plight, not understanding where life was going, what was happening, so everything was ruined by the war. And then I just arrived in the United States because there was a sudden change of plans. I had big dreams to get my master's degree in the United States, but I was planning to get my bachelor's in Ukraine, and then the war happened. And my family and I realized that right now it's definitely impossible to study at home. And I got to the United States. I had to travel through 7 different countries, and eventually I came to the United States, and I just called Georgetown University on April 19, the Office of Admissions, the place where I work right now. And it was way after all the deadlines for application, and I just asked whether it was still possible for me to apply, and they said yes. After that, they sent me a personal application link through which I was able to submit all the necessary documents, all the necessary materials, and I got in. And because of the incredible support of one of the alumnus and as well as Georgetown University, 7 other Ukrainian students and I are now able to attend this university and get the education of our dreams. So it's absolutely incredible. And what is more, that war is happening every day, more damage is happening, and university is very decisive in helping more even Ukrainians, and next year we're waiting the new cohort of Ukrainian students. So it really means the world to how university is helping us and definitely changing and saving our lives. So it means a lot. And just quickly touch on the thing that like how art is connected with me. I used to dance for 10 years. Dance has always been a lifestyle. Dance has always been the way I felt my life. I happened to represent Ukraine at the World Championship and European Championship. I got some awards there. And even right now, when I'm done with dancing, I still can never call it being done with dancing, because even now, when I had to be in Germany as a forced refugee for some time, like when I felt this urge to speak, I did not speak, but I just went to the place where no one could see me. I just plugged in my earphones and I started dancing. And this is the best curing for myself. So yeah. Thank you.
So we're going to open it up to questions. Try to keep your questions focused on, or coming from a place that centers on children. We're not in the practice of doing that. It's easy to get into politics and war, and you can ask about all that stuff, but try to center your question with the children in mind.
Emmanuel, so what happens to most child soldiers as they grow up?
You know, when you're young, a lot of people can pay attention. But some of the most who are my age now, people probably think you can get over it, get a life. But they don't know. I didn't know what trauma is. I didn't have a word for it. First time I experienced it was when I was in school in Kenya. When you're in a survival state, trauma does not show. All your focus is zoom on how you can survive. But when you went to a relaxed state, that's when trauma shows. I used to say that one young man in Kenya was in a ghetto. We have a conversation, and there was some psychologists around, and they discovered a new thing probably they never knew before, because this guy was saying, look, where would trauma show up? When you wake up, your next neighbor is hungry, you find a dead person, somebody get robbed in front of you. There's no time for trauma. At that moment, your brain is zoomed on how you can survive. And so now some of the ex-child soldiers or lost boys that were brought in the United States that did not get the proper family structure and support to be given to them, it didn't go well on them. Some of them are just drinking, some of them couldn't complete school. How did it impact me when I was in school? A pen would get stuck in my hand and I wish the teacher asked me a question. What's in your mind? So some of the factors that it was difficult for me to even pass in school was because of it. Because what does trauma do? It shut down the faculties of our mind that are responsible for long-term projects. The part that is responsible for taking difficult parts, like maths would be so difficult. So you're more leaning into dancing and creativity. But the things of substance, your brain doesn't have time because you're always distracted and the focus is elsewhere. And it also occupies mental space. So your bandwidth, for you to process difficult information, you require mental space. And so some of them, at the moment, nothing is being done much for those who have grown up, but there seems to be attention for the young ones. You disarm them, then what? If they're not in school, if their dreams are not being supported, they end up escaping and probably going to the army, and the trauma will come back to them in the future. So, but there are positive things that are happening there. There's some individual, those ones who got people giving them attention. I believe in education, so, most of them, you may find the lost boys that became stars here in the United States with those that were taken in by families that supported them through their high school, supported them to go sport, supported them to go and do activities that could help them increase their mental space. Then now they could study.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'd also like to start off with gratitude. Thank you for sharing your pain. Thank you for sharing your joy. It's truly been incredible to be in this space with you all. So kind of touching on what you mentioned about the survival state, I've learned that traumatic experiences and traumatic childhood memories can create memory issues and issues with remembering. And so I'm wondering if your creative practices have helped you all with that, and if you could share any other words of advice for that.
Does this work? Maybe this one works. And I get to have two mics, yeah. I think what's really interesting is for me, because I was around, I was blessed to be around elders who oftentimes would not tell us the full truth for the safety of our well-being. When I got older, I felt like I didn't know my full story, and sometimes I didn't know the full pain, or there was an incident where our family was getting robbed, and my mom was told to go into the room. And as a kid, I was told that, your mom was just giving him her jewelry. But as an adult, I really found out there was sexual harm that took place. So sometimes you are learning how painful the truth was, I feel like, when you get older. And for me, I'm trying to find compassion and understanding, and because I feel like if you don't find, tools of healing, and I think art is a tool for healing. You both said that you dance to heal. For me, I feel like when I'm performing, this is my heaven. This is the ultimate heaven. The stage is my heaven. And I feel like, with violence, that we all need a disruption, something that disrupts, and that disruption being from a pure love. For me, my grandmother disrupted the violence that we lived in. She makes sure that we stayed in innocence, to the cost of knowing our full story. But what I feel like is when I look back to the uglier parts of my story, there was love. There was deep love. and deep sacrifice. And I think as I get older and I want to create art, I just want to remind people that, that sacrifice.
And also the power of relationships as a protective factor for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're here, like, talk about the mental faculties and trauma. I mean, you're here, like, being challenged in a serious way as a Georgetown student, academically, while so how is that working for you? Like, how are you doing trauma and studies and worry and, you know?
Yeah, I think that's honestly a great question. I think you eventually get used to living these two lives, two drastically different lives. In one, you have to worry about doing your homework, and the other one, you have to worry about survival. But honestly, I would like just repeat what Aoife just said. I get an immense support from parents, and every time I try to ask them, and sometimes, like, I sit in the class and I have my phone right here, and I just get the message saying, oh, there's air alert in your hometown. There is a danger of missile flying to hit something there. And it's just very weird to realize that how different world may be, but you just live with that, you just learn how to live with that, and I don't know, I feel just like incredible support that I get from parents and just from the Georgetown community. It's integral because the other day I was talking to parents and I asked Mom, what was the noise? What was the sound noise all the time? And she said, oh, it's no worries, it's all fine. I said, like, no, please explain me what's going on. And she said, oh, it's just Iranian drone flying above the city. And I was like, nothing is happening. And yeah, I think it's a part of Ukrainian resilience, just overall how the character is being shown right now, how everyone sees what Ukrainian courage and bravery is, that no matter what you're going through, you have to stand up for what you believe and you have to defend your values. And I just believe that, I hope this is my mission to be right now here, to get my education. I dream of coming back home and being able to implement all the knowledge, all the experience that I got here and trying to contribute to the development of my country, to our post-war recovery, so that Ukraine will be the place for happiness in the future.
I love that.
So I just wanted to add on the tools of recovery. Most of them, like you mentioned, like you're doing dance, and also you're doing art. And naturally, all of us, we have built-in mechanism that can allow us to overcome traumatic experiences. You know, when I was taken to Nairobi for the first time, I was just given a pen. I wasn't an artist as a kid, but I started drawing. Now, Emma and her friends started looking at my drawing. They said, this kid's drawings are ugly. Because I'm drawing of people who are being shot. You know, I'm sharing my experience. The body is finding a way to let it come out. I wanted to do karate lessons. I wanted to play. Different activities I was taking in. But I didn't know that's how my brain was leading me. When I was in school, my only way, if I'm to listen in class, so I found a method. If I play football, if I jog, if I dance, then I go to class, my brain has mental space to absorb the difficult things. So I realized art creates mental space. Now what we do after we create mental space is what matters. If we go and put on junk, then we don't transform. And so I was also learning Winston Churchill had a rough childhood as a kid. Even as an adult, his traumatic experiences was following. So where was he, helping himself? He would go and, behind a little lake, and he would just draw stuff, beautiful pieces of art. And so I would say, like, find what is that thing that you like doing. They call them hobby. Actually, your hobbies is your therapy, So if you can find what your hobby is, if it is to kick football or to walk in the forest or hug trees or do whatever it is, that thing that you do that gives you joy whether somebody appreciates it or not, but you really love it. And so in terms of the tools that I can show people now is, I realize stories. Well, for anyone who's traumatized, stories, positive stories that connect with them can help them create new beliefs that can generate different emotions to impact their day. Because when you're traumatized, you have beliefs that have shaped your perspective. For example, who are the people that suffer the most? When you meet a traumatized person, it's the people who loves you that suffer the most. They're the one who cry. They're the one you say the most horrible things to them. They're the one you hurt the most, you know? And so what I found and I still practice today is, I call them, I say is, you must know what your purpose is. Your purpose is that thing that you give without expecting anything in return, that thing that you do that gives you joy. You know, there was a Canadian young lady who had traumatic experiences when she was raped as a little girl, and her life was messed up. And one thing she said, what helped her heal was when she found these old people that needed attention. So she'd go and give them care, then found out that children who need care. And then she began engaging herself in a purpose-driven initiative and end up healing in the process. So I would say find something that you can do, help somebody without expecting anything in return. And engage yourself. That's an act of a purpose. It could be charity, it could be volunteering somewhere. So that act of purpose, that calling that you want to do, like this young man is driving Factor Nights to come to university, get educated, go back and help. You see, that's a purpose-driven initiative. Not coming to school so he can go and make more money in Wall Street. He would suffer from anxiety and depression because his built-in motivation is a higher calling. You see the difference? So it's purpose-driven. So once you know your purpose and your vision, what is it you want to create to bring into this world? Then changing your environment. So once you know your purpose, you know your vision, and changing your environment, there are two types of environment. There's external environment, there's internal environment. External environment is the friends you hang out, the things that you see, what you eat. Have you heard the terms, when you hang out around fools, you'll be the next fool? So just see around, who's a fool, you know? Associate yourself with wise people. But what I want us to focus in is the internal environment, the habits and the beliefs. So I zoom it into habit and beliefs, how we can create positive habits and positive beliefs. And how do we create positive habits and beliefs? There are three pills that I tell somebody to swallow. And the blue pill is identify what is really causing you a problem. And you do a mantra around it. For example, let's say you're lacking unworthiness, or not being enough. So and then you could say, I am worthy. Yeah? So let's say you're a Muslim, you say, I'm worthy, thank you, Allah, I'm worthy. And if you're a Christian, you could say, I'm worthy, thank you, Jesus, I'm worthy. But if you're an atheist, you say, I'm worthy, thank you, me, I am worthy. So you do that, I'm giving an example, you do that 200 to 300 times a day. So when you do that 200 to 300 times a day, there's a part in our brain, in our mind, that is called the reptilian brain. It holds our built-in motivation circuit. Because you're repeating that all over and over, you're going to hack into your subconscious and create a belief. Now, when you create that belief, within those 30 days, you're doing that mantra, that belief will create a new perspective of you, and it will generate emotions that will motivate you. So now we have created a belief. Now, how you water it to make it stronger is you have to look for stories. So you spend 30 days every day, 15 minutes, to 1 hour, for stories on how to be worthy. You see? Because there are a lot of people who never found they were not worthy before. Any problem we face, somebody went through it and found a solution. So we listen to different stories after different stories after different stories. Why? Our lives are shaped by the stories we hear, and our success depends on the stories we're told. So now you created a belief, now you provide it with knowledge and stories that are true. So the belief has a know-how on how to be worthy, and also practical aspects. So I call that probably the red pill or blue pill. Yellow pill would be incremental step of action. So every day you do little practice of being worthy. So when you do those three things, according to science, our brain releases what is called neurotrophins. And those neurotrophins will create new pathway, new dendrites in your brain that will absorb those information for short term and long term. But what actually happens as we continue, what actually changes our life is something called myelin. So when the myelin is created, then you change your life. So as I talk to you, it doesn't mean my trauma is gone. What actually happened is I created new pathways that allow me to function. New pathways, like for example, gratitude is one of things you can create. You could say, I'm grateful, and you apply gratitude, you do the same formula. Now, what does gratitude do to me? When a problem comes, I'm grateful for it. Something do me good, I'm grateful for it. And then your entire life changes. I can talk for hours. Thank you.
I was going to say, we have some psychologists in the audience, and actually one social worker was about to ask a question. Julie?
I just want to ask, with this collaborative on global children's issues, as just people sitting here, just normal, regular old people, if we want to care about global children's issues, what would you suggest that looks like in our individual lives? And that's going to Gillian as well. Like, just as an average person sitting here, how do I actively care about global children's issues?
I don't think it should go to me. I mean,
You're part of it. I want to hear you.
I'm part, well, okay, so, I mean, we're doing a week of workshops, right? 12 workshops, starting Sunday, ending tomorrow. There are 3 tomorrow. If you want to come, you can look on the list outside. But what's so fascinating to me is we just like put out a call and said, anybody want to do this, in the Georgetown community, and see what comes. And what I find so interesting is that no matter what you're interested in, and people here are working on heavy stuff, right? And it's so interesting that when you look at an issue that you may have been looking at for a really long time, like there's one student here, she's a master's in environmental justice, and she's been looking at climate change from the scientific point of view and then she did a fellowship with our collaborative and worked with a professor who's a specialist in early childhood development, and she made the connection between climate change and its effect on children, especially young children. And it completely changed the way she approaches everything. And I think, Ashani, are you still in the audience? There she is. So she did an amazing workshop with, they did a workshop together, Ashani and Emily. And Emily approached it kind of from the scientific perspective. And then Ashani is a recent graduate, and she works at the lab on global performance and politics, but also with the Earth Commons, the climate justice piece of the university. And they came together and they did the science piece and the storytelling piece. And they did this phenomenal workshop where we all thought about climate change and felt it as like our child self would feel it. And what does it mean to be a young person growing up knowing that you've got this existential but very real threat? What does it mean as a parent raising kids? When you think about climate change from the lens of children, I mean, the urgency is like hotter than ever, and the creative solutions just start like kids have hope. They see things they see a horizon beyond what we can see, because they're like, yeah, you guys attached to your cars, forget it. Like, I'm never owning a car. And when you start problem solving with kids, like the solutions and the hope and the generative energy is just different. It changes the conversation. So I found it so dynamic to just, why don't we just look at the world through the lens of kids? You know, it makes you more, I gotta do something now, but it also gives you an energy that, I don't know, at age 50, I'm lacking. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I can speak from perspective. I think more from Ukraine and Ukrainian kids. And what we're witnessing right now is basically that there are no boundaries, no thresholds, no crossing lines for the enemy we have. And I think that just like supporting Ukraine in whichever way you can, just making our victory come closer and making it happen as soon as possible is the only way actually to help Ukrainian kids, because I've been home during the winter break and I asked my friends how they're going to school, if they manage somehow to go to school, and the answer was no, because there's a constant danger that even if you go to a class, you may sit for 10 minutes and after that there will be another air attack, and after that they will have to go to the shelter and sit there for God knows how long time. And because of that, there's no other way to solve the problem. And another thing I witnessed when being at home is an incredible patriotism. The kids, they don't want to leave the country. They like my age, they're 15, they're 13 years old. No one is telling about, oh my goodness, I want to go somewhere safer. No, I want home to be safe. Mm-hmm. And support Ukrainian kids is necessary to make the Ukrainian home safe. I just will quickly bring up the example of Mariupol. Maybe many of you have heard about the city that was besieged by the Russian army for over 80 days, and there was a theater where kids were hiding, and they had a very big sign to the Russian military saying children with all capitalized letters, so that they know there is no military in there, there's no need to bombard this specific building, and they still did so. So I just believe that helping Ukrainian people and Ukrainian kids particularly is by doing whatever you can to help Ukraine as a country, to help Ukraine win, and to do it as soon as possible, because this is the only way we can defeat the enemy that wants to engulf us. For this to happen, I know that you like said, don't make it political, and I'm not trying to make it political, it's just our life, and just do whatever you can. Yeah,
Children are political.
Just go to rallies here in DC, do whatever you can, and this will be very precious. Thank you.
I also just wanted to note that Katerina Zubak is in the audience, and she is leading a workshop tomorrow on supporting children and families in Ukraine. And do you want to say something about that?
Yes, so I don't have a mic, but hopefully I can project. So I'm also originally from Ukraine. I've been in this country for a really long time. It's not like so tomorrow we have, please join if you know your question, what can you do to support children and what can we do to keep children in mind? So our workshop is going to actually address that. We'll be talking about the situation in Ukraine, what the children are experiencing, but also the families and those who are taking care of them, so the mental health professionals, the grassroots organizations, the volunteers, because one thing that has happened is that there's a huge volunteer movement, and I know that our guests and everybody who has been in a country torn by war and conflict can relate to the power of the community that appears, and so that's one thing we're seeing right now. So just a little bit of foreshadowing about, thanks to Gillian for putting me on the spot.